Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The Kidnapped Prime Minister by Agatha Christie. Now that the war and the problems of war are things of the past, I think I may safely venture to reveal to the world the part in which my friend Poirot played in a moment of national crisis. The secret has been well guarded. Not a whisper of it reached the press. But now that the need for secrecy has gone by, I feel it is only just that England should know the debt it owes to my quaint little friend, whose marvelous brain so ably averted a great catastrophe. One evening after dinner, I will not particularize the date. It suffices to say that it was at the time when peace by negotiation was the parrot cry of England's enemies. My friend and I were sitting in his rooms. After being invalided out of the army, I'd been giving a recruiting job, and it had become my custom to drop in on Poirot in the evenings after dinner and talk with him in any case of interest that he might have on hand. I was attempting to discuss with him the sensational news of that day, no less than an attempted assassination on Mr. David McAdam, England's Prime Minister. The account in the papers had evidently been carefully censured. No details were given, save that the Prime Minister had had a marvelous escape, the bullet just grazing his cheek. I considered that our police must have been shamefully careless for such an outrage to be possible. I could well understand the German agents in England would be willing to risk much for such an achievement. Fighting Mac, as his own party had nicknamed him, had strenuously and unequivocally combated the pacific influences which was becoming so prevalent. He was more than England's Prime Minister. He was England. And to have removed him from his sphere of influence would have been a crushing and paralyzing blow to Britain. Poirot was busy mopping a grey suit with a minute sponge. Never was there a dandy such as Hercule Poirot. Neatness and order was his passion, now with the odor of benzine filling the air. He was quite unable to give me his full attention. "In a little minute I am with you, my friend. I have all but finished. This spot of grease, he is not good. I remove him. So." He waves his sponge. I smile as I lit another cigarette. "Anything interesting on?" I inquire after a minute or two. "I assist, how do you call it? Charlady to find her husband. A difficult affair. Needing the tact, for I have a little idea that when he is found he will not be pleased. What would you, for my part? I sympathize with him. He was a man of discrimination to lose himself." I laughed. "At last, the spot of grease, he is gone. I am at your disposal. I was asking you what you thought of this attempt to assassinate McAdams." "Enfantillage!" "Enfantillage!" replied Poirot promptly. "One can hardly take it seriously. To fire with the rifle, never does it succeed. It is a device of the past." "It was very nearly succeeding this time," I reminded him. Poirot shook his head impatiently. He was about to reply when the landlady thrust her head around the door and informed him that two gentlemen below who wanted to see him. "They won't give their names, sir, but they say it's very important." "Let them mount," said Poirot, carefully folding his grey trousers. In a few minutes the two visitors were ushered in, and my heart gave a leap, as in the foremost I recognized no less a personage than Lord Esther, leader of the House of Commons, whilst his companion, Mr. Bernard Dodge, was also a member of the War Cabinet, and, as I knew, a close personal friend of the Prime Minister. "Monsieur Poirot," said Lord Esther. Interrogatively, my friend bowed. The great man looked at me and hesitated. "My business is private." "You may speak before Captain Hastings," said my friend, nodding to me to remain. "He has not all the gifts, no, but I answer for his discretion." Lord Astaire still hesitated, but Mr. Dodge broke in abruptly. "Oh, come on. Don't let's beat about the bush. As far as I can see, the whole of England will know the hole we're in soon enough. Time's everything." "Pray be seated, messieurs," said Poirot politely. "Will you take the big chair, my lord?" Lord Astaire started slightly. "You know me?" Poirot smiled. "Certainly. I read the little papers with the pictures. How should I not know you?" "Monsieur Poirot, I have come to consult you upon a matter that is most vital urgency. I must ask you for absolute secrecy." "You have the word of Hercule Poirot. I can say no more," said my friend grandiloquently. Side note: Sexy Grandma Darkness would really love that word.
"It concerns the Prime Minister. We are in grave trouble."
"We're up in a tree," interposed Mr. Dodge. "The injury is serious, then?" I asked.
"What injury?"
"The bullet wound."
"Oh, that!" cried Mr. Dodge contemptuously. "That's old history. As my colleague says," continued Lord Astaire, "the affair is over and done with. Luckily it failed. I wish I could say as much for this second attempt."
"There's been a second attempt, then?"
"Yes, though not of the same nature. Monsieur Poirot, the Prime Minister, has disappeared."
"What?"
"He has been kidnapped."
"Impossible!" I cried, stupefied. Poirot threw a withering glance at me, which I knew enjoined me to keep my mouth shut.
"Unfortunately, impossible as it seems, it is only too true," continued his lordship.
Poirot looked at Mr. Dodge. "You said just now—" "Oh, do. You said just now, monsieur, that time was everything. What did you mean by that?" The two men exchanged glances. Then Lord Astaire said,
"You have heard, Monsieur Poirot, of the approaching Allied conference?"
My friend nodded.
"For obvious reasons, no details have been given of when and where it is to take place. But although it has been kept out of the newspapers, the date is, of course, widely known in diplomatic circles. The conference is to be held tomorrow, Thursday, evening at Versailles. Now you perceive the terrible gravity of the situation. I will not conceal from you that the Prime Minister's presence at the conference is a vital necessity. The pacifist propaganda, started and maintained by the German agents in our midst, has been very active. It is the universal opinion that the turning point of the conference will be the strongest personality of the Prime Minister. His absence may have the most serious results, possibly a premature and disastrous peace. And we have no one who can be sent in his place. He alone can represent England." Poirot's face grew very grave. "Then you regard the kidnapping of the Prime Minister as a direct attempt to prevent his being present at the conference?" "Most certainly I do. He was actually on his way to France at the time."
"And the conference is to be held?"
"At 9 o'clock tomorrow morning."
Poirot drew an enormous watch from his pocket. "It is now 9:15. 24 hours," said Mr. Dodge thoughtfully. "And a quarter," amended Poirot. "Do not forget the quarter, monsieur. It may come in useful. Now for the details. The abduction, did it take place in England or in France?"
"In France. Mr. McAdams crossed to France this morning. He was to stay tonight at a guest of the Commander-in-Chief, proceeding tomorrow to Paris. He was conveyed across the Channel by a destroyer. At Boulogne he was met by a car from the General Headquarters and one of the Commanders-in-Chief's ADCs.
"Ah bien?"
"Well, they started from Boulogne, but they never arrived."
"What?"
"Monsieur Poirot, it was a bogus car and a bogus ADC. The real car was found in a side road, with the chauffeur and the ADC neatly gagged and bound. And the bogus car? It is still at large. Poirot made a gesture of impatience. Incredible! Surely it cannot escape attention for long. So we thought. It seems merely a question of searching thoroughly. That part of France is under military law. We were convinced the car could not go long unnoticed. The French police, our own Scotland Yard men, and the military are straining every nerve. It is, as you say, incredible, but nothing has been discovered. At that moment a tap came to the door, and the young officer entered with heavily sealed envelope, in which he handed to Lord Astaire. Just through from France, sir. Brought it on here as you directed. The minister tore it open eagerly and uttered an exclamation. The officer withdrew. Here's news at last. The telegram has just been decoded. They have found the second car, also the secretary, Daniels, chloroformed, gagged and bound, in an abandoned farm near C. He remembers nothing except something being pressed against his mouth and nose from behind, and struggling to free himself. The police are satisfied as to the genuineness of his statement.
And they have found nothing else?
No.
Not the Prime Minister's dead body? Then there is hope, but it is strange. Why, after all, to shoot him this morning? They are now taking too much trouble to keep him alive.
Dodge shook his head. One thing's quite certain. They're determined at all costs to prevent his attending the conference.
If it is humanly possible, the Prime Minister shall be there. God grant it is not too late now. Now, messieurs, recount to me everything from the beginning. I must know about the shooting affairs as well.
Last night the Prime Minister, accompanied by one of his secretaries, Captain Daniels.
The same who accompanied him to France?
Yes. As I was saying, they motored down to Windsor, where the Prime Minister was granted an audience. Early this morning he returned to town, and it was on the way that the attempted assassination took place.
One moment, if you please. Who is this Captain Daniels? You have his dossier?
Lord Astaire smiled. I thought you would ask for that. We do not know very much about him. He is of no particular family. He served in the English army and is an extremely able secretary. Being an exceptionally fine linguist, I believe he speaks 7 languages. It is for that reason the Prime Minister chose him to accompany him to France.
Has he any relatives in England?
2 aunts, a Mrs. Everard, who lives in Hampstead, and a Miss Daniels, who lives near Ascot.
Ascot? Is that near to Windsor, is it not?
That point has not been overlooked, but it has led to nothing.
You regard the Captain Daniels, then, above suspicion?
The shade of bitterness crept into Lord Astaire's voice as he replied, No, Monsieur Poirot. In these days I should hesitate before I pronounce anyone above suspicion.
Très bien. Now I understand, my lord, that the Prime Minister would, as a matter of course, be under vigilant police protection, which ought to render any assault upon him an impossibility?
Lord Astaire bowed his head. That is so. The Prime Minister's car was closely followed by another car containing detectives in plain clothes. Mr. McAdams knew nothing of these precautions. He is personally a most fearless man, and would be inclined to sweep them away arbitrarily, but naturally the police make their own arrangements. In fact, the Premier's chauffeur, O'Murphy, is a CID man.
O'Murphy? That is the name of Ireland, is it so?
Yes, he's an Irishman.
From what part of Ireland?
County Clare, I believe.
Thames, but proceed, milord.
The Premier started for London. The car was a closed one. He and Captain Daniel sat inside. The second car followed as usual, but, unlikely for some unknown reason, the Prime Minister's car deviated from the main road.
At the point where the road curves? Interrupted Poirot.
Yes, but how did you know?
Oh, say if it then. Continue.
For some unknown reason, continued Lord Astaire, The Premier's car left the main road. The police car, unaware of the deviations, continued to keep the high road. At a short distance down the unfrequented lane, the Prime Minister's car was suddenly held up by a band of masked men. The chauffeur, "That brave O'Murphy?" murmured Poirot thoughtfully. The chauffeur, momentarily taken aback, jammed on the brakes. The Prime Minister put his head out of the window. Instantly a shot rang out, then another. The first one grazed his cheek. The second, fortunately, went wide. The chauffeur, now realizing the danger, instantly forged straight ahead, scattering the band of men. "A near escape," I ejaculated with a shiver. Mr. McAdams refused to make any fuss over the slight wound he had received. He declared it was only a scratch. He stopped at a local cottage hospital where it was dressed and bound up. He did not, of course, reveal his identity. Then he drove, as per schedule, straight to Charing Cross, where a special train for Dover was awaiting him, and after a brief account of what happened had been given to the anxious police by Captain Daniels, he duly departed for France. At Dover, he went on board the waiting destroyer. At Boulogne, as you know, the bogus car waiting for him, carrying the Union Jack, and correct in every detail.
That is all you have to tell me?
Yes.
There are no other circumstance you have omitted, my lord?
Well, there is one peculiar thing.
Yes.
The Prime Minister's car did not return home after leaving the Prime Minister at Charing Cross. The police were anxious to interview O'Murphy, so a search was instituted at once. The car was discovered standing outside a certain unsavory little restaurant in Soho, which is well known as a meeting place of German agents.
And the chauffeur?
The chauffeur was nowhere to be found. He, too, had disappeared.
"So," said Poirot thoughtfully, "there are two disappearances. The Prime Minister in France, and O'Murphy in London." He looked keenly at Lord Astaire, who made a gesture of despair.
"I can only tell you, Monsieur Poirot, that if anyone had suggested to me yesterday that O'Murphy was a traitor, I should have laughed in his face.
And today?
Today I don't know what to think."
Poirot nodded gravely. He looked at his turn-up of a watch again. "I understand that I have carte blanche, monsieur, in every way, I mean. I must be able to go where I choose and how I choose."
"Perfectly. There's a special train leaving for Dover in an hour's time, with a further contingent from Scotland Yard. You shall be accompanied by a military officer and a C.I.D. man, who will hold themselves at your disposal in every way. Is that satisfactory?"
"Quite. One more question before you leave, messieurs. What made you come to me? I am unknown, obscure in this great London of yours."
"We sought you out on the express recommendation and wish of a very great man of your own country."
"Comment, my old friend, Prefet?"
Lord Astaire shook his hair. "One higher than Prefet, one whose word was once law in Belgium, and shall be again. That England has sworn."
Poirot's hand flew swiftly to a dramatic salute. "Amen to that. Ah, but my master does not forget, messieurs. I, Hercule Poirot, will serve you faithfully. Heaven only send that it will be in time. But this is dark, dark. I cannot see." So quoth this raven. My apologies for the horrible accents and voices and how they switched so fast on me. I'm going to have quite a blooper reel on this one if you're interested in hearing it. Thank you so much for listening, my dears. I'm going to find some more thrillers, mysteries, sort of things. Thank you all for coming, and a special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Charlotte Emerson, Ermin Case, Darren and Jennifer, and Laura. The spot of grease. Oh, that's way off. Cha lady. What was that, Ian? Infantilage. Infantilage, replies Poirot promptly. The injury is serious, then. Oh, that's wrong one. Unfortunately, impossible as it seems. Oh. Poirot's face. Bad grown, very grave. That's a weird. He's being preferred. The premier. The abduction. Did it, please? Really? Can you turn down your music? Apparently not. It's you, Steve. It's Steve again. Actually, it's probably Mophie or Lopey. Where did I end? Okay. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.